a significant portion of our audience is actually what we would consider like non-technical people, or we call them like traditional, nonprofit, social impact crowd, people that are otherwise pretty skeptical of what we're building. And we have a lot of them that subscribe to our newsletter, which is primarily on Substack right now. So today I want to share some of the practical things that we've learned in the last year of communicating with these people about how to reach them, about what we're building and get them excited about it. So I know that a lot of people that are here today are probably more on the product technical side, and communications might not be the thing that you're spending all your time on. I totally get that when you're building and you have limited resources, limited funding, limited time, it's not always the first thing that comes to mind. It's not always the first thing that you really can afford to spend time on. So, totally understand that. Please don't forget about it. I know that everyone here is working on some pretty incredible technology that can change the world, really big stuff. And part of that is it's not just doing it in isolation. We really need to bring everyone along if we want to lead and get people excited about it. So, I'm sure everyone's heard, like, if a tree falls in the woods, is anyone there to hear it, right? Like, we need to be talking about this stuff now. And from my experience, and I think a lot of people here will have this similar experience, because I've heard a lot of people mention in talks today that, the community doesn't care about Web3. Well, and I think if we go outside right now and talk to some random person on the street, they're going to have no idea what we're talking about, or they're going to be familiar with things like this. And these are some of the recent crypto scary blockchain headlines that I pulled. And you might be looking at this and thinking, well, this isn't what we're doing. It's totally different. But this is what the average person is seeing. They don't know what refi is and what we're doing with carbon markets and eliminating poverty. And if they're not hearing it from anyone else, this is the stuff that they're seeing all the time. And so it loops in their head, especially if you're working in an industry like policy or a nonprofit or social impact, where there's so much due diligence and attention paid to really wanting to get it right. You don't want to wade into this really sketchy, scammy looking stuff. So this is what we don't want people to think of when they think of this industry. So, why does that actually matter? I know that a lot of people look at that and they say, well, forget it. We're just going to be quiet. We're going to build. We're going to focus on what we're doing. That's actually really dangerous, because when it comes to societal level innovation, you cannot do that in a vacuum. A big component of innovation is actually diversity of thinking and connectivity with the community that we're trying to innovate for. So that means that we need to be reaching out to people that are working on these problems already in different ways, even from a non-technical perspective. And we really do not want to risk alienating them even further, where they look at this industry and they say, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to talk to people. I don't want anything to do with it. So this is why I think it's so important that you think about communication. So how do we actually reach the people? So a common misconception with communication is that, you get your fancy mission statement, you tell everyone what you're doing, you inspire them, and that's it. They'll get it. Actually, how you communicate with them is so much more important than what you are communicating. So I'm going to share the tips that we have learned at Web3 for Good about how you can actually do that. These are very high level, easy to implement generalization tips, but things that you can do right now in altering your vocabulary, the tools that you use, how you reach out to people. So a big one, this probably isn't news to anyone, but speaking a language is really big. That's the number one thing that we hear feedback on, is that people don't understand what refi. You don't know what that means if you're not in the space. We use a lot of jargon in this space. And sometimes it's it's fun, it's cool, it's a way to kind of be part of an in-group. I was thinking the other day, someone was talking about, coordination. We love talking about coordinating, but a lot of times it's just kind of a fancy way of saying organizing, or getting together and working on solving problems. So it's not that you can never use these phrases, right? There's a time and a place, but think about who you're talking to and how you can say it in a much simpler way. So one example that I like that I saw recently was Change DAO, which is an organization that they sell social impact NFTs. They rebranded to Change Gallery because they realized that by calling themselves Change DAO, people were so focused on like, what is a DAO? What is this technology? And this helped them to, really focus on what they're actually trying to do instead. So simple is better all the time. Less shilling and more trust is another big thing that we come across. And I think there's like a tendency of like, you want to say, we're going to change the world. We're going to the moon. We're going to make a huge difference. And that's awesome. You should absolutely celebrate yourself and hype up what you're doing because you're going to do that better than anyone else. I'm not saying that you have to downplay yourself, but think about when you're having a conversation, how you can meet people where they're at and listen to their concerns and actually like give them a realistic answer because people aren't stupid. There's no like magic wand solution. If there was, we would be doing it by now. I think with Web3 for Good, one thing that we've done really well is, so we hype up what we're doing. We talk about all the ways Web3 can be used for good, but we're not against sharing things that, might have like a negative take or like, could this work out if it doesn't happen this way? We try to create more of a balanced approach. And then what you aren't seeing is a lot of times behind the scenes, we're having one-on-one conversations with different social impact leaders that reach out to us because they see that we're not just like shilling everything. And we'll tell them this might not work out. It definitely won't work out if you don't help us with it. So please like think about that when you're communicating, how you can incorporate trust into the conversation. Tools is a very big one. I like to talk about the example of GivePact. They're a crypto fundraising platform for nonprofits. And at first they were kind of doing what everyone else does and making a Discord, but no one knows how to use Discord, especially if you're not in this space. And so they ended up making a Slack channel instead, which is, I think for a lot of us, like Slack, email, it's not like the sexiest, coolest, newest tools, right? But like people know how to use them and they feel comfortable using them, so they're more likely to use them. So think about that, like with your tools. We distinguish between, we call them like passive tools versus participatory tools. So in Web3, ReFi, this whole space, we really encourage participation. And that's why these tools like Discord and Mirror are awesome. But for someone who's like really new to the space, they don't necessarily want to jump in and participate right away. It might be scary. They don't know how. They want to find a way where they can kind of passively consume to learn. So you want to give them as many opportunities as they can to figure out what they're doing without having to like dive right in. And maybe they will dive in later, but first you need to reach them, where they're at. Newsletters is like how we do it at Web3 for Good. I saw some statistics the other day about how with nonprofit communication, email is still the preferred method from donors. So that's like also an interesting, unexpected conclusion. Conferences, I think, is a big one. Like everyone here right now, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but I bet most people are kind of familiar, like already in the ReFi space. But going out to other conferences where like some people might think you're a wacko, like that's a good feeling to have, or maybe not a good feeling, but it's a good situation to be in because you're going to reach other people. I know like the MIT Energy Conference is happening right now too, and a lot of people have probably gone back and forth there. Like that's great if you're going to that event and talking about what you're building there. Definitely highly encourage that as well. Relationships is a really important thing. I have actually worked as a freelance journalist, so I'm speaking a lot from like the journalist perspective. But this goes for journalists, you could say policymakers, like whatever skeptical person you're trying to reach. These are like real people. It's, there tends to be this narrative that like the media wants to make Web3 look evil. It's probably not true. My experience is that good journalists, good policymakers, good leaders, they're working off the information that they have to make decisions that they think are the best for their communities. So like they only know as much as they're able to learn. And right now they're learning a lot of things from like the bad headlines or the people who are really vocal about why this is bad. This is why we need to be really vocal about what the good potential is. Now, you should not barrage people. There's a way to do this. Like, don't slide into DMs of journalists and tell them like, we're going to the moon, we're going to change the world. That's a bad idea. Because again, like I was saying, trust is really important. So that's where the slow build of the relationship is really important. And these are some like very simple things that they're not going to have an immediate return, but following people on social media or just reaching out on, LinkedIn, whatever your means of communication is, to just, I'm here, I can answer these questions. This also works if there's a negative story and you just want to say, hey, I have a different perspective. Don't try to sell people too hard on it. Just make it clear that you're a resource. And I think you'll be surprised. People will keep you in mind. They'll reach out later. Don't be afraid, I think, is a big thing. A lot of people are really afraid of the bad coverage. They're afraid to put themselves out there. It seems easier to hide. You don't really want to be in that spotlight. You can do this very passively. The Harrow tool that I have here, some of you might be familiar with, that's an easy website where reporters will put, if they're writing a story and they need a perspective. So that's a great way to just jump in and be like, hey, I can share my perspective on this. But giving your time really is what makes a strong, good, healthy relationship. Existing networks is my final point here. I'm not telling you that you have to build the whole communications department from scratch and drop everything that you're doing and focus entirely on communications. I know that is not realistic. You do not have to do this because there's a lot of people that are already doing this. There's a lot of ways that you can tap into this pretty easily, I think. So for people that do have a little bit more time or do want to be more hands-on, you can pitch and you can write for a lot of different publications. You could reach out. Then a lot of times the editors will be listed on the website. You can tell them, I have this idea. This is why I think it's relevant to your audience. Don't pitch people on things that are not relevant to their audience. But I think you can kind of see if there's an opportunity there to communicate. Some of these examples too, like Apolitical is a media organization that works with government employees, and a lot of people are going to learn about different tools and different resources there. So and they accept outside contribution posts. So that's a great opportunity to kind of get in front of policymakers in the earlier stages. Forbes is a well-known contributor program. Industry organizations, less sexy right now, less cool, but still pretty important. TECNA stands for Technology Councils of North America. I think most states have one. In Massachusetts, we have MassTLC. These are groups that are you pay for a membership. If you're a startup or even just a single founder, the fees to join these are really low. And what a lot of people don't realize is they have built-in communication teams. I actually used to work for MassTLC, so that's kind of my bias coming in. But my job at MassTLC was to promote the work of our members, and a lot of members didn't even realize that. So you can come in as a small startup, and these organizations will write blogs for you. You'll have speaking opportunities, and you're getting in front of yes, other technology organizations, but also a lot of members are local universities, nonprofits, people who just want to get in front of other technology groups. And the people who work at these organizations are really close with policymakers. So it's just kind of a good way, an easy way to get in and get your message out there by giving back to the community. LinkedIn groups, I think that's pretty obvious, but join them, participate, don't shill, be a resource. I really like Reconsidering Business. They also have a newsletter that I think is really great to just connect with social impact leaders. And then let Web3 for Good help. That's kind of my pitch for what we're doing. We send out a weekly newsletter of things that are going on in this space. And like I said, our audience is mostly traditional, nonprofit, social impact leaders. So we're reaching people who are really curious to see what's going on. And it's a safe, easy way. You can send us links. I'll get into that at the end, but you can send us if you have existing content or any press releases, news, that kind of stuff. We also do original content, and we're building out an editorial calendar so we can interview you, we can profile you. We're going to be doing a lot more of that lately. So reach out to us. That's something that we want to help with too. So just to conclude, again, why I think this is so important. And I don't know, like, for those of you who, if you want to think back to like 2009, 2010, like what I think of as kind of this Web 2, the birth of Web 2, if we want to call it that, social media, that was like right when I was starting my career. So I remember like being a college student and being super excited about social media is going to change the world and all these new ways that we're going to communicate. And outside of the tech world, the people building, people kind of thought I was crazy and that I didn't have a real job and like this is going to blow over. And then on the other extreme, there was a lot of headlines about how social media was going to destroy like the media as we know it, all this stuff, right? So here's what happened. We were quiet. We kept building. These tech companies grew. We were right. People came, used social media, but a lot of people didn't participate until fast forward 10 years. And now there's a lot of bad things with social media where teenagers have depression and democracy is collapsing, if you want to be dramatic, right? Like there's a lot of things that I think that if we had had more people involved earlier, we could have avoided, or at least we could have made it not as bad, right? So with what we're doing now with Web3, refi, whatever terminology you want to use for this space, we have an opportunity to actually bring people in from the beginning and avoid doing that stuff. And that's why I think that the fate of the world really does depend on, how we communicate this stuff now. And I think as builders, we have to remember that the strength of our tools is only going to be as good as the ability that we have to bring other people on board and get excited about them too. So for anyone that's interested in our newsletter, you can scan this QR code to subscribe. Super simple right now. We've just been on Substack for the last year, but we're really excited that we are in the process of finalizing a grant from the Climate Collective. So we're going to have a lot more time and resources to build out our editorial calendar. So we are actively looking for people that we can help tell your story. We're looking to form more partnerships with different organizations to share content. If there's any other like creative idea that you have, reach out. That's my DM on Twitter. That's our general email address. You can find me afterwards. I can give you my personal contact information. And yeah, also our design, we have a really exciting new brand identity that's coming out in a couple weeks. So you won't see this much longer. This is our Canva logo, but lots of exciting things happening for us, and we would love to have you on board. So thank you.